Welcome on into a Cleveland Browns mailbag as our first question comes in from Nighthawk. Last year, the Browns traded for Za'Darius Smith after the draft. Who might they trade for this year? Good question, Nighthawk. When I look at the Browns' needs, they're not massive. But if I had to put together a list of positional needs, I would say the Browns could stand to add maybe another linebacker, maybe a running back, depending on Nick Chubb's return date, a wide receiver, although I don't really think they need a wide receiver, but Andrew Berry is always looking to upgrade at important marquee positions, and him drafting a wide receiver every year as the Browns GM, I think says a lot about where he views the wide receiver position ranking amongst other position groups. Tight end, I definitely think is a quiet big need for this team because if Njoku goes down, who else is there? Then you got offensive tackle. Depending on the recovery timelines for Jed Wills, Jack Conklin, and DeJuan Jones, if one, two, or three of those guys is not on pace to be back, by the week one of the season, I could see them adding another tackle. But if you're looking at like recognizable names, I would toss Deebo Samuel out there. I am not in any way, shape, or form advertising that Deebo Samuel is going to make the Browns roster, or I beg your pardon, be the Browns trade. However, I could see Deebo Samuel catching Andrew Berry's interest if the availability is real and the price were to drop. So Deebo Samuel, I could see being a guy that Andrew Berry goes, well, I traded for Za'Darius Smith last year in May on a Friday night because why not? Maybe Deebo Samuel is his why not this year if he's really available. Now, would you trade for Deebo Samuel? Yes or no? Get in the comment section and let me know whether or not you would trade for Deebo. Next question coming in from Joshua Miller. I'm still a bit salty A.D. Mitchell was taken only 2 spots ahead of us. The trade guru Andrew Berry couldn't find a way to move up 2 spots. Really? Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. I think it's also worth noting that there may not have been a team willing to come down. Like, I don't think the Colts were looking to come down once A.D. Mitchell was available to them. And internally, I've got no idea where the Browns stood on A.D. Mitchell. I know the Colts GM, Chris Ballard, roasted, anonymous sources that said there were character concerns regarding A.D. Mitchell and his, temperament, I guess we'll call, when his diabetic and blood sugar levels aren't stabilized, and that seems very unfair to hold against a human being. But I don't know if that was something that crept into the Browns war room or not. I agree that A.D. Mitchell was someone that mid-draft I was like, keep falling, keep falling, keep falling. But for the Browns, I feel like they were internally much more content with their wide receiver room than outsiders believed. Deb, next one up. I've heard analysis say that wide receiver Jamari Thrash was a steal. Do you agree? I don't think he was a steal. I think in order to be a steal, he had to be a guy that a lot of people thought would go much earlier in the draft. And I feel like round 5 is pretty fair for Jamari Thrash, right? He had 1 year at a Power 5 conference at Louisville. So the level of competition he went up against at Georgia State was not superb. So it's hard to know whether or not, if you break a tackle against some Sun Belt defender, can that really carry over to the NFL? Well, it's a lot easier to make that jump from the ACC than the Sun Belt. But there are some really good games about Thrash's makeup that I like a lot. I don't think he's like a technician route runner like a Devontae Adams, but I do think it's one of his skills and attributes that he's great with the ball in his hands. I think he does struggle with contact a little bit, but all in all, I am excited about the pick because I do think it brings a little bit of a new flavor to the wide receiver room. Tomorrow, Cuber, what do you say about trading for DPJ for maybe another undrafted, underrated receiver to really beef up this receiver room? Trade for Donovan Peoples-Jones? Really? I don't think that's going to happen. Well, one, he's a free agent. Let's kind of open up there. I don't know if you're thinking of another DPJ, but I can't think of another one. So what do you say about trading for DPJ for maybe another underrated receiver to really beef up this receiver room? I think when it just comes to adding another wide receiver in general, Andrew Berry is happy with the room he's made, right? He's got his guys in there. And the last thing I would think he wants to do is tinker with it and remove snaps away from players he spent currency on. You know what I mean? In a very like Colin Cowherd analogy, it's a little bit like going to the store and spending money on all this hamburger, ingredients, the buns, the cheese, the meat, tomatoes, bacon, and then going home and ordering a pizza. It's like, well, then why'd you spend all that much money on the hamburger stuff if you were going to go something different? Why'd you trade for Jerry Jeudy and Amari Cooper and Elijah Moore if you were going to go trade for another guy and decrease their production and their role in this offense? That's why I don't think the Browns are going to be big, buyers in a wide receiver trade market. But if a name like Andrew Berry comes around, or in this case, it would be like the world's greatest pizza Andrew Berry's ever had, he may decide, F it to the burger I was going to make. I'll go have that pizza. All right. Thank you, Colin Cowherd, for that bad analogy I just gave. Lil Beam, next one up. Isn't it a coincidence that I wanted the Browns to trade up with the Patriots to go get Joe Milton, and the Patriots got Joe Milton? Non-Browns related, Joe Milton, I think, is going to be this upcoming preseason's like DTR. Remember how popular Dorian Thompson-Robinson was, like league-wide last preseason? I think that's Joe Milton this preseason. Book it right now. Leather Neck Viking. Isn't it true that the draft debt owed for Deshaun Watson is now paid in full? Yes. Every pick that was exchanged between the Browns and the Texans has now been used to draft a player or traded for a player in some way, shape, or form. So moving forward, there are no picks belonging to the Texans that came over from the Browns or vice versa. And listen, I know that this has been a popular topic of grading the trade now that it's complete. I don't think it is complete. The picks may have been made, but now we got to see how the picks work out, right? We got to see how Deshaun Watson plays for the Browns. We got to see how Jerry Jeudy plays for the Browns, since the Browns used a draft pick from the Houston Texans to acquire Jerry Jeudy. And the same goes for Houston. The Texans used draft capital to move up and get guys like Will Anderson. They also had some missed picks like Kenyon Green and Dameon Pierce, which I think just goes to show, even when you get a huge truckload full of picks, it's hard to make them all count because the draft is such a crapshoot. So I'm not in the business of going, well, now that all the picks have been exchanged, we can now decide who won this trade. Nope, I don't think we can. I think next offseason we'll have a much better idea than right now, but I think it's way too early because it hasn't been a full amount of time for all the picks that turn into players that have gotten on the field at all yet to have a good idea as to who made the better end of the draft capital. Joshua Miller. I've seen grades from the supposed draft experts ranging from A- to a D. Which end of the grading spectrum did the Browns fall? I would say right in the middle, honestly. I gave the Browns a C+. I think it is a C+. I think if we're being realistic about the picks they made, I think Michael Hall can be a really solid, like as a ceiling. Could be a little short selling maybe for some. Rotational defensive tackle. I don't think they found their next Chris Jones. Would love to be proven wrong on that. I think Zach Zinter can be a starting guard that maybe makes a Pro Bowl here or there, kind of like Wyatt Teller, and that's a really good ceiling to have. Like, I don't think he's going to be a Quentin Nelson, a Joel Petonio, or a Zach Martin. I don't think physically he's probably gifted enough to be one of those guys, but I think the Browns did a good job of covering their bases for next offseason as they continue to have a habit of, we don't have a first-round pick. All right, we're not going to reach for a positional need we have this year. We'll go get the best player available and likely check a box for next offseason, like they did with Michael Hall and Zach Zinter. Mark Stevenson. The Browns have the best media outreach out of all the teams. This channel proves it. Very good at trends and news. PD is the best of the chat sports peeps. Really loved the tour of the studio. Mark, really, really appreciate your kind words. I love what I do. I love waking up every morning and literally feeling like, I don't know what the best analogy would be or, comp, but waking up and it's kind of like the last day of school, like that excitement of like, oh, it's all over. Except it's not about school ending. It's like I get to go in and try and figure out what I want to talk about today. And that's a really fun feeling most of the time. Some days you're like, there's nothing to talk about. And I think you can probably pick out which videos those days fell on. Trace, do you want to pick a card?
I would love to pick a card, and I'd also love to show some extra love to Petey. I want to go with the 7 of diamonds.
7 diamonds. Go with the. Give me the queen of spades. 5 of diamonds.
Dude.
5 of diamonds. Isn't that what we did last time? Or 2 times ago?
Yeah, I picked that one before.
All right. That will do it for us on today's show. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but hopefully nothing I said got dated. But today's mailbag was filmed, by the way, as you all, bid me a fair due here, on Tuesday, April 30th. So just want to get that out on the record right now.